Hi, everybody, and welcome to Matrix Live Season 3. I think we've decided to call an end to the never ending, what's the right word, kind of ending the sort of limbo, if you will, that Season 2 found itself in. And we had a bit of an inter-season break last week with Ben and Neil coming to us live from Mozfest. And now this week, basically, we're going to try just a different format in general for Matrix Live, which is rather than it just being me and Amandine reading through everything that's happened that week, have a really quick cursory overview of interesting stuff, but then go and dig into something a bit more specific. So in this instance, we have Nat, is joining us to talk about the end-to-end UX work which has been blitzing away on Riot, but hopefully should be relevant to the whole Matrix ecosystem as we have this epic mission to try to get the best possible UX ever for end-to-end. So if we get it right here, it's going to be right everywhere. But before we get too stuck into that, let me just give a very quick update of things which have been happening this week. And it's actually been a pretty exciting week. Python 3 stuff has been going more and more live on matrix.org. I think even the master process might be running it now, which means we've just got pushes and application service workers left. And the winnings have been crazy in some places, like RAM easily down by a factor of 3 on some of the workers, and CPU down by a factor of 2. So all of the Python 3 stuff is coming home to roost. Also, State Resolution version 2 is, State Resolution Reloaded is finally implemented with a performant version of the code, and we have our first ever V2 room in existence, which has got the very creatively named test state room, I think, which is on V2. At the moment, there are only about 5 of us in it, but we're flushing out the first round of bugs, and then we shall start seeing new rooms out there using the new room state resolution semantics, which we've been working on since, June or so. But it's all finally happening there. Meanwhile, on the Riot Web side of things, the redesign is going great guns. Bruno is cranking out code, and Nad has been working with him on refining the prettiness factors of Yoni's design, which is all going into place there. And what other quick things? Halfshot has been doing lots of Black Ops bridge work, including getting the Node Purple bridge working again, which I wrote like 3-4 years ago now, but has completely rewritten it using Node's native API. And as of a few hours ago, we got bidirectional puppeted libpurple bridging working again, which is super exciting. I haven't actually written any notes of what's been going on. And any other obvious things that people have been excited about beyond the end-to-end stuff? The entire Riot Android app.
Oh yeah, of course.
Cool. Basically, lots of exciting things we could be talking about in detail. We're going to focus on the end-to-end one. But yeah, new Riot Android is looking incredible. It implements the new skin, or at least the draft of the new skin that we have there. And it's a complete rewrite in Kotlin rather than Java, using Realm as a database and using RX as the pattern for the data flow in it. And it basically launches instantly, like no more spinners, ever, which is exciting stuff. There isn't even an APK yet, and critically it's read-only at this point, but the guys in France, and particularly Francois, have been doing an incredible job with that. And what else? There's probably enough to be going on with for now. Let's talk end-to-end.
Yeah.
So what's the story now?
So basically behind the scenes we've been working a lot on trying to package up all of the encryption work that's been done to date into a UX that is is as useful as it can be to as many people as possible. There's a few kind of goals that we set ourselves that a lot of other messaging apps kind of fall short on. So things like because encryption is done end to end, generally they'll only encrypt for one device, which we know is a huge pain point. For example, if you have like a work laptop, but then you want to send a message from your personal phone later that evening, with some apps you have to kind of tether from one device to the other, whereas we want Riot and Matrix, we want you to be able to use encryption wherever you are and over multiple devices.
I think some of that is the security question of where you store the keys. And I think that the reason that WhatsApp and Signal go for this tethered approach is such that your keys only exist on one single device, your phone. You don't need to worry about the massive pain in the ass of keeping them in sync between multiple devices, and it's all just a bit safer and simpler and therefore more secure. Whereas for better or worse, we're trying to give proper, true multi-device end-to-end encryption, which is where a lot of the massive pain in the UX comes from.
Yeah, and kind of to be clear, I think all that security stuff is totally valid, and that's stuff that we will support. You'll be able to configure all of that if that's what you want. But I think the reality when you take a step away from all of this and you watch normal, everyday people use a messaging app, the reality is that if they can only access it on one device, they'll just think it's broken. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I sent you a message on my phone, but I can't read it on my iPad because of reasons unknown. So for sure, it'll be awesome to kind of conquer that. So multi-device support is something that we thought was really important from talking to people.
iMessage gets it right, come to think of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been end-to-end encrypted forever. It doesn't use a ratchet from memory. It uses a shared key, so it's not quite as over-the-top and sophisticated as the Signal and WhatsApp stuff.
I also don't know how much Apple can kind of shortcut because they have iCloud and OS-level storage. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of just seeding your data everywhere on your behalf.
Honestly, I think they just cheat by not using a ratchet, so they don't claim to have perfect forward secrecy on it, so you can share the history and replay it. Basically, like what we're doing. So there is a precedent there, but it's not exactly in the open land of Matrix.
And by the way, if you hadn't have sort of caught on so far, I'm anticipating during this screencast that there'll be almost a bit of a good cop, bad cop dynamic where I say something horribly reductionist, trying to advocate for, surface level, this is how users should interpret the feature, and Matthew will interject and go, but technically it works nothing like that, and I'm just explaining things horribly wrong. So
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to contradict.
It's the equilibrium we'll balance in the middle between the two. So multi-device support is something that we really wanted to get right. We thought it was unacceptable if encryption just didn't work on some devices for some reasons that you didn't understand because of because of some keys being missing or whatever. The other thing we wanted to get right was that if you end up in a disaster where you've lost all of your devices, maybe they've been stolen, maybe you dropped them into a river or whatever, we thought you'd need a way to be able to recover your message history. Again, some people won't want that. They'll see it as a security feature that your history would be lost with the device, and that's fine for those people, but we think most people would just expect to be able to recover their history somehow. And the other thing we wanted to get right is we wanted to let you verify who you're encrypting messages for and who is sending you encrypted messages, and we wanted you to be able to persist that verification and that trust across all of your devices and across multiple rooms, so that if I, for example, verify Matthew, if I'm in another group chat with Matthew, I know that I still trust Matthew. Which, again, some other apps, they do verification or trust per room, or they do it per user, per room, and things like that. Or you verify on your phone, but it doesn't mark them as trusted on your laptop, or vice versa. So we kind of wanted to get these three main things right.
And historically, we've really screwed up on this, especially on the verification per device, which was being the most flexible thing. I'm sure that anybody who seriously uses end-to-end encryption by now is completely fed up with having to manually verify new devices all the time, whereas they could just verify the user and it spread out across their devices, which is the sort of thing. The risk of spoiling thunder, as well as being the flip side of the argument, is what we have on the horizon.
Sure, I think there's just the room. You just create so many false positives. Like you shouldn't be punished because I decided to buy a new phone, and that shouldn't be suddenly everyone else's problem that talks to me that they have to kind of worry about whether or not I'm malicious because I've upgraded a device or whatever. So in order to kind of satisfy these things, there's a few features that we have in the pipeline that we're already working on. That we'd love to show you guys some wireframes for, that just essentially they're a proof of concept that show how these features will hang together, and the next step from here is to kind of gather feedback and then piece pieced together the actual final UI that we'll use in Riot, which should serve as, I guess, kind of a flagship UX for all Matrix clients everywhere.
We should mention that this Matrix Live is twinned with the blog that Nat has put together, detailing all of this in excruciating detail, and also linking through to the even more excruciatingly detailed reference, and indeed the XD experience designer mockups, which we're about to look at. So if you want to see this in lots and lots of detail, then please go read the blog post and go through in the details there. Also, in case it wasn't obvious, this is mock-up. These are wireframes. These are blueprints. This is not what the final app is going to look like. It's very much just blueprints for our UX editing purposes.
Yeah. Cool. So the first thing that I like to show people when looking at these wireframes is this, just to kind of illustrate a point that getting this right is incredibly difficult. We have about 50 screens just to mock up various states, just to make these sort of 3 or 4 main features work. But I think for today, we'll just go through like an overview of each one and at least introduce the features to you guys, and you can feel free to give us feedback on Riot. So the first one that we want to talk about is cross-signing personal devices. So when you sign into a new device as an existing user, let me find the right screen. Yeah, this one. Essentially, you'll get a prompt on all of your existing sessions with a QR code which you scan on your new device, which will essentially prove that the new device that's logged into your account is trustworthy. When you do, I'll let Matthew kind of take over and explain what's happening technically in the background in a moment. But doing this does 2 things. One, it transfers all of the encryption keys so that your new device can access your old device's encrypted message history. And it also signals to other users that this new device is trustworthy, because at this point you've had to have logged into the new device and scanned a code using your existing device, which you already trust.
Yeah, about the size of it and the technical level. This is based on a bunch of key verification algorithms which Hubert in Canada, or Uhereg as is better known, has been working on over the last couple of months. And the QR one is particularly cute because if you scan the QR code with the new device, it mutually authenticates the devices with one another. So it's not like Signal or WhatsApp where you have to both scan the 2 sets of QR codes. Instead, you do it once and you click OK after having checked the right result, and it's a much simpler UX. And there's half the scanning required and half the webcams required critically. And then you also have the short authentication string way of comparing the 2 devices together. And again, this isn't a simple comparison of a fingerprint like you have today. Instead, it's a much shorter code, one that's generated by handshaking between the 2 devices and creating a kind of mutually secure string that they can then compare with one another. But actually, in terms of implementation, the verification stuff hasn't landed yet, but pretty much all of the rest of this we now have the building blocks for.
And I think one of the things that I really like, which you reminded me of talking about mutual verification, is that I believe we figured out a system where it doesn't matter whether the new device scans the old one or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So if one device has a more convenient camera to use, then you can just use that one. And it's not like you have to be, if you've got a big iMac with the webcam, you're not like kind of jolting that up to try and capture a small screen or something like that using the webcam, which should feel great. Cool. So that was the first thing, cross-signing. So when you log into a new device, you scan, compare a code, and that proves that the new device is trustworthy. Is kind of the highlights from there. And the second big feature that we're working on, I've nicknamed Secure Message Recovery, which means I can't even find it. It's here. And the basic idea here, let me find a better screen. In fact, no, this screen's good. The basic idea is that you can back up your encrypted message keys to the home. Looking to Matthew to make sure I'm not explaining anything correctly. You can back up your message keys to your home server, but secure it using a recovery passphrase or a key, which works really similar to a password manager, pretty much. And the benefit of this is that if you lose all of your devices, or if you can't cross sign, then you've got a way to retrieve your message history. Did you want to brush that up with any more technical?
No, not really. I mean, it's what people might be familiar with as incremental backups, as we've called it so far, and it's got the same semantics as when you do a manual backup, except it's just happening automatically all the time to the server. It's encrypting your keys as it goes, so it's not like you're putting unencrypted keys on the server. And it's just a lot more convenient because if you lose all of your devices, now you can, when you log in on the new device, you can either scan an existing device, but obviously if you've lost them all, that's not going to work. So the alternative is to enter this passphrase or possibly the recovery key in order to get back into the account.
And I guess there's other, like we always talk about losing devices, but it might be that you've only got one computer in a shared household, let's say, so you're always logging out, right? So it might be like that I need to log out, and then a week later I come back and I just want to log into the same machine, and then I can always access my history.
Yeah.
Which I think is awesome. We don't want to lock those people out from being able to use encryption.
And in fact, there's a really common use case similar to that, even more similar for the Matrix audience, which is people using Tor browser or a heavily locked down Firefox, where every single new session is a new device because it deletes everything between sessions. And it's not even a shared device, it's just somebody being paranoid using a secure browser. And we've always had this massive problem that end-to-end encryption completely falls apart in that situation, because by the time the device has sent the messages, it's disappeared again and can't provide, well, basically everything falls apart. Whereas by providing a place for the messages to live, or the message keys to live on the server, it means you can almost rehydrate your end-to-end state when you log back in again, which was for ages one of the holy grails of the end-to-end stuff, and it is so exciting to finally have both the UX and the code to hand. And by the way, all of the passphrase recovery stuff is now implemented. It's on Synapse, I think possibly in 0.33.8, or it might not have been released yesterday, but either way, it's certainly on develop, and it's implemented on Riot Web, on develop. Again, I think it has to be turned on with a labs flag, and Manu is almost finishing it on iOS. It doesn't use the UX that Nad's been working on in parallel yet. Instead, it's kind of a keep it simple, stupid UX to get up and running. But the very next thing on our to-do list on the Riot website is to go and actually implement these screens and have the entirely new logon flow that it provides.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly run through this. So, I mean, it works hopefully how you'd kind of expect. So you can enter a recovery passphrase. We'll have some strength validation, so we'll make sure that these passphrases are secure enough. Once they are, you'll confirm it again to make sure that we don't have any typos or anything like that. Oh no, I've caught myself in a loop. You'll have to refer to the blog post. I'm going to fix this, and then you'll be able to click through to this from the blog post on matrix.org. But essentially, it works kind of how you'd expect. You set a passphrase, and then you can download a recovery key as a backup. And one other thing that's worth mentioning on message recovery is that it's completely opt-in. If you were to create an account, we're essentially in Riot, we're essentially going to tell you that secure messages and end-to-end encryption exists. And then after that, you'll be able to use the app in encrypted and unencrypted rooms. And we'll just suggest to you that it's a good idea to set this up if you think you need to recover your messages in future. And you can totally opt out of it, and that's totally okay.
You don't even need to set a passphrase too. So you can opt into backups, but if you're worried about somebody dictionary attacking your passphrase, or you just prefer having a key rather than a passphrase, then we can do that too. And in future, we'll be able to hook it up to U2F or YubiKeys or whatever your favorite key storage mechanism is.
Cool. All right, and then the next thing I think we should look at is probably verifying trust or verifying other people. So here I've got a mock-up of me talking to John Doe. And on the right, we can see a list of devices that John's using to encrypt messages with.
I think we should go full screen so folks can have a chance of reading the verbiage. There we go.
Yeah, cool. A bit of explainer text, just kind of saying what encrypted messages are and how they work. We're about to verify the user. We're going to somehow, we haven't figured out the specifics of this. But we're going to have messages in the timeline that are kind of highlighted more, possibly immutable. I can't remember if we figured out that.
It will show you what your client is seeing. It's not going to be synchronized reliably between clients, but in some ways that doesn't matter that much. What really counts is what this particular device sees, who it trusts, who it doesn't trust, and that's the information that will be interleaved in the timeline so that you can, if John adds a new device, then if your device sees that John has added a device, then you get this notification saying, hey, John has added, or we have seen that John has added a device, or something like that. So this has been a bit of a last minute stumbling block because there isn't really in Matrix a absolute view of the room in the first place, let alone an absolute view which says who added devices where. It's all done from the perspective of a particular client. So the best you can ever do is to provide the view from a particular client. But you can see from a user perspective, it would be a bit crap if your iPhone says, hey, John added a device at this point, and you look at the same thing on the laptop and he says he added a device at a completely different point in the conversation. Intuitively you think, well, one of these has got to be true, what is it? But the reality is that the different devices saw the new device at different points, and that's why they have a different view of what's going on, and there's not much we can do about that because we don't trust we can't trust the server because it's end-to-end encrypted. Otherwise the server could start lying about when devices were added or not added, and then you have a whole world of security problems. So long story short, I think 98% of the time it's going to be fine, and as long as we word it correctly, and don't make it sound like it is the one true vision of the room, but instead it's just new device detected from John or something.
Yeah.
Would be perfectly fine rather than John added a device and make it sound more absolute. In other news, this is a complete sort of microcosm of what Nat and I and Amandine and Tom and Dave have been doing for the last month, having conversations like this to try to eke out every last morsel of cliched confusion on the end-to-end UX.
Yeah.
But consider it a sneak preview of Nad's life, at least. Sorry, Nad.
Yeah, that's definitely been all-consuming. I think it's penetrated my subconscious. Like I've dreamed about end-to-end encryption. I've woken up in the night and just had visions of it. So yeah, microcosm is definitely the word. Cool. So we over here, when you're verifying other users, you benefit from all of the other niceties that we discussed earlier with cross-signing. So it doesn't matter who scans whose code, whichever device is the most convenient to use if you're in person. If you're not, you can verify text code. What else is interesting to say here? The mutual scanning as well. Again, you don't need to...
It's the same mechanism, but it's between people rather than between your own devices, which was the flow we were showing before, I guess.
Yeah. Cool. And then a bit hard to show in a mock-up because it doesn't have a camera and all that kind of jazz, but let's just pretend that we've scanned this code and we're happy. Essentially, at this point, we'll say that John's verified. And then we'll put a little shield on this lock to say that we're happy that this we trust the devices that are encrypting for this room. And we're happy with John now. We're happy that John's trustworthy, and importantly, this trust will persist across every room that John's in. So
I think that looks pretty good actually. I hadn't spotted before.
Really?
The shield on the padlock was we had a big. Should it be padlock? Should it be shields? Should it be shields with padlocks? Should it be padlocks with shields? And I think padlocks with shields once tufted up with the actual asset could be really nice.
Yeah, I think it'll work well actually. And then separately, you might be able to spy if you're very eagle-eyed. But we were talking about whether padlocks should mean private room as opposed to public and all the rest. And I think in the end we settled on using globes to signify that a room is public.
Okay.
As a slight segue. And then
at least it's not a hash.
Yeah. And then there's one other screen that I wanted to show. I think it's actually missing from here. But anyway, so yeah, after trusting, let's say that John then logs in with another device that we don't recognize, then we can just show some warnings thoughtfully on the messages sent from this new device and show specifically which device that is. And then it's up to you to decide whether you want to manually verify it or if you just want to say, hey John, what's this weird new iPad? Could you please cross-sign it so that I know that it's you? And that's more or less trusting other people. So I think, in a very unscripted, roundabout way, that is. Oh no, let's have a quick look at settings as well.
Yeah.
So settings, I guess, like all that's kind of good to cover here is that so first of all, we are redesigning settings as a part of the redesign, and we're working to basically make all of it make more sense. And here we've got just some of the settings related to security mocked up in these wireframes. But one thing that I think is important that's worth highlighting is that out of the box in Riot, we're going to have a set of default settings that we think makes sense for most people. And an example of that might be we think that you should always be able to talk to users that you haven't trusted yet in encrypted rooms, because we think most people would expect encryption to not be blocked by a lack of verification. But if you do expect that you only ever want to talk to users that you've manually verified, then you will be able to configure that. Likewise, if you want to, let's say Matthew's got 3 devices, if you want to manually verify all of those individually, you don't want to trust the cross-signing mechanism, that's okay too, you'll be able to enable that. But out of the box, we think that most people should trust cross-signing, and most people are okay to talk in encrypted rooms, even if they haven't trusted users yet.
Precisely. Can't wait to have new settings. I mean, even the wireframes look sexy here.
Yeah.
And it will make such a difference. Do we have flows on here for what happens if you're just using the app and somebody starts and you set up a new backup at the same time? So what do you see if you're on a device and some other device, somebody goes and starts backupping? Or is that considered a kind of, oh yeah, is it this one here?
Yeah, I believe it's this one. We might want to, I'll zoom in a bit.
A new recovery method. Oh yeah, so it's the same as when somebody changes your passphrase, that somebody started recovering things, and if you didn't start a backup, then this is an evil server admin trying to add a backup and to exfiltrate your keys, at which point you should hit the panic button instead. Cool.
And I think we'd also talked about making this a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like hold your hand a little bit better in terms of maybe someone else has your password, so maybe at this point might want to suggest for you to change your account password and stuff like that. But those are the kind of details I'd expect where we're gonna like really polish over the coming days, pretty much.
Sure.
And I think that's more or less it. So we have a way for you to cross-sign and trust your own devices so that people don't have to. We have a way for you to verify other users. And we have a way for you to access your encrypted messages from server-side backups, basically.
That's about it.
Yeah.
What's an icon language proposal?
That is just the icons.
Okay.
That's missing encrypted with warning, possibly on this screen. But
yeah, I was wondering whether encrypted without trust should look less trusty somehow. Broken padlock or something.
Yeah. It's yeah, I think like we had a pretty close look at SSL in general, just to see kind of what's been established there in terms of icon language. And I think, I mean, there are people that have written like theses on this subject. But yeah, no, fair point. You can totally.
I just wondered. I mean, personally, something that we discussed a bunch was whether untrusted encryption was almost a bug, and that we should try to organize things so that you just never ever have rooms where the users aren't trusted. So you would always need to have done some kind of verification to get that. I think in the end we ditched it because it's just going to be onerous when you're talking to strangers to do that verification. But I'm wondering if we can slightly tilt people there by making the untrusted thing feel a little bit more
untrusted
instead broken. Yeah. I don't know, perhaps we could just grey out the padlock massively.
Or have this shackle slightly broken.
Yeah, honestly, having the main bit of it crumbling into dust, or having a big slice out of it, so that in practice you could always slip it off, might be the best way. Cool. Well, super exciting stuff. Thank you for taking the time to talk us all through your world of. I was describing it like a labyrinth of kind of Minotaur pain as we tried to nail it at last. But the good news is that Dave is blitzing away as of I think the beginning of next week in order to get that sorted. You killed Riot, but you didn't kill Slack.
No, it's someone's. I can look it right on here. So I'm getting spammed.
We don't get spam on Riot. Either way, yeah, Dave's blitzing away, actually putting the new UX into place. I think the plan is to not implement it on the old Riot skin at all, only do it on the redesigned skin. So we should expect to see it landing over the coming weeks. Super cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else we should talk about.
I have tunnel vision on encryption, so don't ask me if there's anything else.
Is that? I thought you had some amazing ideas for redoing how Communities UX works.
Oh no, yeah, actually, yeah, no.
All of the onboarding stuff for the redesign, but we've been deliberately trying to part all of that in terms of nailing the end to end. But I think honestly, there's not much more to be nailed.
So anything more outside of encryption, more matrixy that you wanted to?
Don't think so. I think we got the main things there. I should have said that Travis is doing a lot of really good stuff on Riot Web, which has been stuck forever, like fixing permalinks so that they work reliably at last with a new via parameter. So there's a bunch of MSCs hanging around for that. On the crypto side, Dave has also been doing MSCs specifically to determine how the passphrase and the key of the recovery system are linked. Originally, we were going to have them completely decoupled, but I think in the end, we're going to generate the key from the passphrase if you set a passphrase, and if you don't set a passphrase, we create a random one that we don't tell you, and we generate the key from that too. But it's all very much kind of low-level detail, which isn't that important for anybody. And oh yeah, we also incorporated Matrix.org Foundation.
Oh yeah,
we should probably have mentioned that one in the update, but unless you were living under a rock, you have probably already heard that on Monday we finally incorporated the foundation. Myself and Amandine as the initial board of directors, but we are hunting around to get another 3 directors, or guardians as we've called them, because it much better reflects the role in order to get involved in the project, and we should be announcing the first of those hopefully next week. If you're interested in the Matrix.org Foundation stuff, read the blog post, or perhaps myself and Amandine will go and do a Matrix Live digging deep into the legal twistinesses of that when the time comes. Anyway, we've been talking for ages. I try to think how long this is. But tell us what you think, guys and girls, and if it was useful, and if you reckon that more of an interview structure, almost a talk show, is a better way of doing this than me and Amandine reading out the minutes. And don't worry, it's not going to be me every week, or now for that matter. But we'll try to shake it up across the team as much as possible. Yeah.
But for feedback on the E2E stuff, I guess if it's more dev oriented, E2E dev is the best route, which is linked to in the blog post. If you have more design sensitive concerns or suggestions, come find me in the Riot design room and we can chat there.
Indeed. Cool. Well, have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Thanks for listening to us drone on. Bye bye.
See ya.